Welcome back, Bradford. We are positively inclined toward your dissertation proposal. I would say that the comments are not fundamental, as in this dissertation couldn't be written and couldn't be written well. That's good news. Many times that is the case. And we're also, the professors have expressed their pleasure at the progress you've made since your dissertation précis and our meeting at that time.
Which is significant, by the way. No doubt that you're right.
No, we catch the significance and praise you for it. Our goal now is to get into your ears and onto tape the goals of ways that we believe the dissertation needs to be written or can be written such that it will be of the highest possible quality. Please know that the fact that we are raising the standards for you here is a compliment. A student who didn't have your capacity wouldn't be face these kinds of standards. But we want you to know that having an outline that passes you to ABD status is not the same as having a dissertation that is one that you would be proud of and that would pass a dissertation defense with flying colors. So these will be a set of fairly high bars, fairly demanding, but the three of us are in complete consensus that they represent the standards of excellence for your particular project. I will say nothing because we have the privilege of these two professors on the line, and you have the privilege of me in almost weekly meetings. Right. So with no further ado, I turn to Professor Faber.
So Brett, let me for a moment consider that this is not a dissertation, but is already a written book of a famous philosopher, theologian. And I am just an evil spirit trying to make you mad with questions. Well, I think you could have done better. But obviously, right, you're famous doesn't matter to you. You can just put it aside later on. And so that's kind of when I want to go with a few questions, and maybe there's something good about it that comes out of it.
I'm sure there will be, indeed, yes.
So a few things, and they're not totally systematic, but like there are certain elements I want to mention. They may sound a little moody, but that's exactly how I would address a famous person, right? Otherwise, like what would just emotional a little bit. So, okay. You are not a materialist, are you, or are you?
That is a difficult question. It is. I'm a board. Well, on my best days, I'm not a materialist. I should say, but I do have tendencies to border on toward that position. I admit that I do, but I'm fundamentally not a materialist. I don't think, although I'm sure I write as if I am one at times, and I even have tendencies toward that direction. But no, I would not consider myself a materialist, Dr. Faber. I wouldn't.
So given your own definition from before, not even animals are materialists, right?
Right.
Right. So there is faith in them, or there is even a religious strain in them. And you say in your dissertation, but I am religious. So you go to certain positions, biological positions in their philosophical kind of situatedness, and you say, but I'm religious, so I have to think about that with a terminology that comes from religion, in this case, or like the Western tradition, a Christian influenced, Jewish, Islamic maybe influenced tradition, right? And you make a case beyond materialism in a sense when you claim certain things like that there is a God, that the primary activity of God is love, that love is what holds the universe together. That's not like, it's not a materialist position. I mean, you could accept a Feuerbachian understanding of love, which does not need God. It's more like almost a Buddhist position. Pratitya Samutpada comes to mind, but you don't. So you differentiate God from the world in some way, although sometimes you don't want to. So you can have sentences like, God is creativity in the world. You can say something like this, as others have done. Gordon Kaufman has done that, right? Identifying this, and the other Kaufman too, in some way. So like you get this kind of pantheist kind of strain in your own thought. You wanna be like I don't know, a spiritual materialist or something, you know, that is not dualistic, but you need to kind of invoke that language in order to go the limitations that open up if you can't use that language. You can't use the language of love and stuff like this, right? So in some way, I wouldn't say negatively necessarily. Dualism or duality always lingers in your dissertation, in what you want to achieve, and you kind of are in between this. Yes, you want to bring this closer together, but then it's almost like a physical force. It kind of hinders you at a certain point to identify and kind of gets apart again. So and there are certain elements where I see that happening. For instance, okay, if I am totally moody, I would say, "Ord, so what?" Like, I don't want to even explain it to me. I just leave it with that because it's what you want to do. That's fine with me. But the whole language of love goes back to whom? You know, I mean, who is not talking about it in some way in a religious philosophical context? What kind of love? Well, you make the differentiations, obviously, philia and agape and eros, and then you want to avoid that and use amor instead, without actually, you know, so this is a little element. You bring them together in amor, right? But amor, you know, doesn't give it to us. Like, how are they then related, and why would you prefer one over the other or not? Right? You don't make an argument why they are one or they are not actually one. They should be differentiated and so on. So it's a small point with love. The bigger point being that the activity of love that you present to us is an age-old symbolism that I don't see necessarily, you know, be inventive in Ord, given to us. Like, Ord is talking finally about love, right? Okay. Okay, so now what is special about that? Love, right? Okay, so there are, for instance, like the book like God Can't. Now, if I go to the mystical language of Nicholas of Cusa, who says God is can, the can itself, he says, right? What is better? Why is Kant better than, it's a Whiteheadian point too, right? So, yeah, Whiteheadians, not Whiteheadians would say, like Griffin, God can't do certain things, right? That's, you know, a point of, an important point for theodicy and so on. But then what is it if I identify God with can? Is that a pantheistic notion? Is that a panentheistic? Is this a theistic? You know, is it doing what you want? And wouldn't the can't be a duality, bringing this again apart? Like, there's something cannot be done, so it's something else apart from, in the negation. You understand? It's a dualistic thing. Or take the notion of kenosis. It's an age-old, obviously, notion, right? You're going back to Paul and to other traditions in other words used. And has a rich kind of understanding that goes beyond self-giving. I mean, self-giving is sure. I mean, that's self-evident. You know, why would you, like, you know, what is so great about the ordinary understanding of kenosis, except that it is dualistic, because it reserves God a fullness that has to be given away and maybe reclaimed but you kind of presuppose that dualistic notion of God in some way in it. Like I take, for instance, Plotinus, who would say God is not and God has nothing. There's no possessions, right? Is that kenosis, or does it begin with a different kind of notion by which that standard is already something different? I don't even have to begin with something to give away, because it's already, the giving away itself is, you know, or there's nothing to be given away because there's nothing to be had. You know, there's kind of a different understanding that's kind of, I think, closer to what you want to achieve before you jump back to this kind of dualistic, well, you know, it's not totally avoidable, again, if you not want to be a materialist or a pure spiritualist, but they kind of, you have to think about how you use the kind of necessity of some kind of dualistic language in the context that you want to avoid it, and where you want to actually situate yourself in it, right? Because you want to sound like a more pantheistic thinker, but you sound actually more like a theistic one by using that terminology. Again, Ort, right? That's what you get. Yeah. So I don't see what is special. I know Philip has a different opinion about it, and that's fine with me. I'm just seeing these parts of the story that I see as like problematic in like dualistic monistic context. Another one, yeah, okay, go ahead. You want to say something?
I entirely agree with you, sir. I try to walk a line there, if you will, Dr. Faber, between, I personally have tendencies toward monism. I mean, I do.
On your best days.
Oh, right.
You're not a monist. No, on your best days, you're not a monist, because you talk about, you're not a materialist either, right? So you have to differentiate between that and something else.
Okay. You bring up some very good points there.
You say that.
Bring up, I missed what you said there, sir. I'm sorry. That last sentence.
You don't have to be sorry. I just, this is a kind of inconsistency that will go with you. It will work through all the things. You have to be just aware of it.
Okay.
Nobody has a solution. You know, if we would have solution, there would not be any philosophy anymore, I guess, right? But you have to be aware of it as you work through and make your arguments as best as you can.
Okay. I mean, and I'm trying to toe the line of panentheism, if you will, over and above pantheism, although I must say I do have tendencies toward pantheism, and my own position might be amenable to such an appellation of pantheism.
But if it is, then you would have to go beyond your notion of kenosis and God and just forget it.
Okay.
You would talk about the harmony of the sympathy of all things among themselves, and you would come to a more materialist position on love that is also age old.
Okay.
Right?
Speak on that a little further, if you don't mind. I mean, this is good stuff here. I must say it is.
You research it, right? It's a Greek position. Research it. I want you to write a paper on it, if I could, right? You would find out there are different Greek positions, there are different Hindu positions or Indian philosophy positions that would be closer to that. Yeah. So you research it, right? Okay. I don't want to go there because, you know, I think you should find out about it.
I should make that journey myself. Okay, very well. Yes.
But I will mention Stoicism as one of them, right? Oh. So just making a case here. Not saying that's true. I'm just saying like there are these positions that are talking more in the way you want to talk, but they try then to avoid as far as possible the duality of language or even dualism coming up, right? Feuerbach I mentioned already.
Now, I must say to you, the whole Feuerbachian type of movement there, I'm not familiar with, and I need to do some plowing into that idea. So thank you for making mention of him precisely. I do appreciate it.
I've kind of, you know, walked classes through that and also written about it in my Divine Manifold. Chapter 11 is only about Feuerbach and his notion of love and not dualistic thinking about love. I think you're better off by going beyond this dualistic language with or, but if you want to stick with it, be at least aware that there's a problem involved in it, that it will not leave you. Okay, I want to go to another point that goes more into the biological or the philosophical biological question of structuralism or formalism on the one hand, and what's the other, functionalism in some way, or you could almost say pragmatism in some way. It is as it develops, it is as it comes to be. So Gould's position that I like the idea of novelty with Whitehead and the uniqueness of unrepeatability, if you want, of evolution. But I think the complication of Morris's position is actually has to be seen. It's not just the structuralist in my eyes, in my understanding, and I might be wrong about it, but how I would use it is more like there's always some kind of formal element to anything anyway, because otherwise there would not be any order, right? There's not just energy, there is form, there is structure somewhere, otherwise there would not be a universe. They are not the same either, right? Here is a sign of duality. And even if we try to make them the same as myths and philosophical systems too, at a certain point they need to come apart, right? The one becomes two, the two becomes three. It's the beginning of the Tao Te Ching, right? So it's necessary kind of to talk about these differentiations. And therefore, as you wanted it to be, they need to come together in some way. But I don't see that you retrace them together in some way. You want to have a middle position. You want to bring them together. But I don't see how you do this full argument. Is it? You're just avoiding kind of, you're saying like, oh, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be there. You know, I want to have a middle position. But what is it, right? How do they come to make a strong argument for their way to come together? So Conway and Morris, for instance, could be interpreted differently, namely that there is some convergence in a philosophical sense or a metaphysical sense, at least, namely in the sense that you want to make that God values, for instance, complexity. So if complexity would be a formal element, it's a structural element, right? It's different from others, right? So it's something that can be said, it can be repeated in different ways, but it is falling under the formal concept of complexity. Or if you say that God values something, the valuation is a form in a sense. It's something that you can name over something else. It's an attribute, for instance, or something, right? Love and so on. So you use these elements, the formal elements, although you want to be a functionalist, you want to more talk about uniqueness, but you use them or bring them in again without making an argument or showing the awareness that you actually did that. So you're saying, I want to be this, and then you use the other side in order to hide that you're actually on the other side. It's kind of a strange thing, right? So it's more like, here I am, here I want to be, but I don't know how to get there. It's like this bridge to paradise, right? And it's very narrow, right? It's an Islamic concept where you can fall down easily. You have to make it a little broader so that we see how you get there.
Okay, very well. I admit that I may not have done enough footwork, as you could say, with making that movement more apparent, right? And I need to probably I don't know how to do, because I mean you're indicating such. I need to flesh that out a little bit more in the actual dissertation itself. Okay.
So there's another detailed problem with language I want to mention, which at a certain point, being an evil spirit, I'd say, got annoying. That is, you cannot use all the time etymology to clear up things. It's a Heideggerian illness, and it's okay sometimes. I think it's good also to know that stuff, and like it's enlightening and blah, blah, blah. But, sometimes, you're not clearing up I don't know what it was, what energy means or something. If you use the word etymologically where it's coming from, you're not getting to any physical or even categorical understanding necessarily only by going back to, and I've seen you use sometimes with physical notions in etymology as an argument in some way. So it's a detailed thing, but when you use what, I think would be also important.
Okay. Okay.
So that came to my mind. I think in the end, the major problem I see as a bridge in a dissertation from point A when you begin to the last point, that you kind of come to your own understanding of love as the activity of divine activity, immanent, maybe transcendent at the same time in some way, is how do you even need a notion, for instance, of panentheism to address it? And if you do so, you need to really clarify how your panentheism is different from any other notion that you have already practically in your content applied, which is more theistic understanding and more pantheistic. And I don't see you doing this in your proposal, right? You again, you're claiming it, but so as like a middle position, I guess. But you use the kind of disconnected language to kind of to make your arguments, and then you don't want to be there. You want to be on this third one that connects it. But how did you connect them? I don't see.
Okay.
So such kind of missing arguments that you miss, arguments that you avoid sometimes, even like a whole in arguments, can be expressed in different ways. For instance, and then you in the way that you jump from one to the other. So God is God, but God is creativity, right? For instance, that, or you know, is God spirit or matter, or something like this. You know, you talk a lot of spirit at a certain point, and then ask what is matter. Right? Karl Rahner said it's frozen spirit. That's a dual way of not being dualistic, you know, in some way. So you have to find a kind of language, I understand, that is avoiding the duality, but at the same time recognizes you cannot do without it. Okay, this is maybe the strongest point I want to make. Inconsistencies appear in many ways in the way you use language. For instance, you're talking about God not being a cause, but then on the other hand, you talk about God as cause. Or, you know, you're talking about the love to be immanent, and then God values something. Where's the value coming from, right? So the ancients did say it's from the good, and the good doesn't need God. That would be closer to what you want to say. You know, even Plato would be closer to it in some way, although he is kind of the dualist. So you see, it's complicated, but you should like clean up where, you know, the cleaning up is not just cosmetic. It's like deeper in a sense, like you know, you want to use all these categories, and you have to in some way, but you cannot bring them together to where you want to be yet.
Okay.
I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Faber.
Thank you. That's really helpful. When we come back to the conversations, I just want to put on the record, on the tape, we do need to talk about what it takes to establish a middle position. Dr. Faber described that in detail, but we really need to get clear on what that's going to be as a requirement or criterion in your writing. You need to address inconsistencies, for example, in the use of what God causes or doesn't cause. Mm-hmm. With regard to Tom Ord, we need to see how he solves problems that arise in the biology that the other positions don't. I think you have something in mind, but it doesn't yet come through. And then there are a number of debates where you're not clear, and we need to identify key debates in your dissertation, make sure that you and the reader know what is the range of positions and why you are selecting one and not selecting others. And I think I will recall from Dr. Faber's untape recorded conversation earlier in the hour what some of those areas were that you'll need to address about. Professor Delford.
Right, thank you, Brad. You have written an interesting proposal, and we are pushing you to sort of develop it into a really sort of helpful and fruitful dissertation. And I think an important step is in the first section of your proposal when you frame the question. Unless you have a clear question, you won't find a good answer. And this is where I want to push you a little bit. On page 4, for example, in that first section, on page 4, you ask, and I think rightly so, you ask, how does one define God's activity in such a world? An evolutionary world. But framing the question in this way, of course, assumes that there is, on the one hand, a God and a divine activity, and on the other hand, an evolutionary world. And my question here is, before you, try to answer this question, you should mark it off and sort of distinguish it from similar ways of asking similar questions, but a different one. For example, why don't you ask, how does one see God's activity as an evolutionary process in the world? Why make that distinction in the first place, rather than say, well, the very way the world develops, evolutionary, all these processes, they are God's actions.
I don't have a problem with that. No, sir, I don't, not at all.
Yeah, but I see, in the next line, in that on page 4, you say, and you're rightly asked, why do we need a God idea at all? But you never give an answer to this, because that's where you start from. Mm. So you raise a question that you do not answer. And perhaps you should sort of make up your mind what you want to do. If you say, well, yes, I start from the position that, there is this God talk. Mm-hmm. And I want to understand it from how that is compatible or can be related to or can be made fruitful for the debate about the evolutionary picture of the world. Okay. That would be sort of reframing a little bit what you give us here. But as it stands, I see different questions being asked, and they are not all answered, but rather you sort of move into one direction without sticking to your answer, to your question. Okay. So I want you to be careful to sort of ask, is what I'm sort of exposing here and addressing here, is that really an answer to that question, or are you moving into the horizon of a different question in what you do? If you start from you stress this in a number of places, that you start from the biologist's side, as it were, and you look at it from that perspective, then the question becomes, why bring in God at all? I mean, all we want to say here, all we need to explain here can be done without reference to God. Perhaps you want to say, well, no, that is not possible. We should, there is a reason to talk about God in this context. But then, for example, why don't you say the very fact that we can explain all natural processes without reference to God is what God wills us to do. So it's exactly showing that this is what God wants us to do, or what God wants creation to be like, that it can be explained without reference to God. There are positions around that argue like this. I would like to address questions like this in the exposition part of your dissertation, in order to show clearly what your question is, the question you want to address in your dissertation. And this will be a critical tool for you to check on what you actually need in order to address it, and what you can leave aside or have it as a footnote, as it were, in your project. So this is my first and major comment. Perhaps you should rethink your guiding question for the dissertation and formulate it in such a way that you are clear about its implications. A second point would be your reference to the kenotic creativity, the kenotic part. I tried to think through what you have written and ask myself, would anything change if I'd leave the kenotic part or these phrases out of the picture? And I wasn't sure. I couldn't see the kind of work the kenotic references do to your project. Now, of course, you can say, well, it is important that it's a self-giving love. But, a self-giving love may be a way of, for example, achieving more, not less, not giving away, but actually sort of incorporating something. So it's not a way of having less, but getting more. That would not be a use, kenoticism would not be a term for this kind of thing. Now, all I'm saying right now, I think you should not merely mention the term kenotic, self-giving love, but try to substantiate what you mean by kenoticism. You refer to other writings in your proposal, but I think you need to give a clear explanation of why you think it's important to talk in this way, and what do you mean by this. Okay. Otherwise, people feed in all sorts of meanings, right, and read what you write in a very different way.
That's an excellent point, Dr. Dalford. I don't mean to interrupt your monologue or what have you, but nevertheless, I do presuppose that my readers, which again is definitely error on my part, they have some familiarity with some stuff that I've done in the past, right? Yeah. I need to make that more clear. I agree with you entirely. I do.
Yeah, but it's important. You should write by assuming that your audience has no idea whatsoever.
Okay.
And don't assume that they've read all your stuff, everything you have written before, because in your mind, it looks very different from what it looks at in the mind of your audience. Yeah. And it's important that you help your audience to understand, your readership, to understand what you want to say. This is a general feature of a number of your things you say. You tend to use terms in a kind of a obviously in a sense that is clear to you, okay, but not clear to everybody who reads what you write. So I think you need to explain what you mean by your terms, okay, in such a way that they understand, and then stick to that meaning and don't shift meanings on the way. So that when you talk about love in one context as friendship, and suddenly it's something very different when you're still using the term love, etc. So be clear that you have to probably be more explicit than you think you need to be in order to understand, because we don't understand what you mean.
Okay, that's also a very good point. I mean, I do shift context there, and I don't elucidate exactly my transitions. So yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is nothing wrong with having different meanings of a term in different chapters, but make it clear when you shift from one to the other, so that we can follow, the readers can follow what you do. But there is a general point. Your emphasis on the love of God is central to your dissertation in a number of ways. But what are the contrast terms here? What is excluded from God by emphasizing love? Because if everything God does is love, and God is involved in everything, how can we know that that is love or not something completely different? I think you need to be somehow to make clear what you mean here in such a way that you tell us, what it is contrast to, so that, what is not love in the case of God? What's not included in this emphasis on God as love? I think that is important. Otherwise, I don't understand what you mean by God or by love of God, etc. All this sort of remains just words, but it's not clear. And perhaps a final point, you want to replace, in a sense, that's how I read your proposal, you reject action talk with respect to God, for good reasons. I think there are, but you want to go for activity talk. But then you move away from the activity talk and talk about involvement, divine involvement. Mm-hmm. Now, as it looks, to me at least, this is just a shift at the level of terms. But you need to explain more clearly, to me at least, why involvement talk avoids problems that you obviously feel activity talk sort of has, and why that is a better way of phrasing both the question and the answer to your problem. And I think your tendency to create new terms, like the, is not necessarily a solution to the problem.
Okay.
It may be a way of covering up the problem. It's like, you know, if you look for the causal joint between divine and non-divine action, you may have a problem created by the way you define the problem. There may be no problem, but by the way the language you use creates the problem. And you want to be sure that you are not discussing merely terminological problems. You want to, from everything I read in your proposal, you want to address substantial questions. So I think before you introduce a new term, be clear what you want to use it for, and make your readership understand why that term is needed and what it is needed for. And what is achieved by using this term rather than another term. So these are basically the kind of question I have and then, of course, I would like you to, in a sense, write down before you start writing your dissertation. Now, I hope to find out this, and then you write a page what you hope to find out. And keep that locked away. And then check when you have written whether you actually sort of achieved what you wanted to do or have done something very different. And if so, you have to write a different introduction to your dissertation.
Thank you, Dr. Dalf. Indeed, yes. That was most helpful there. It truly was. I mean, I tell you the truth, I've gotten a lot from Faber as well as from Dalford, and I appreciate it greatly. Truly, I do. Indeed.
Good. You're fortunate to have scholars of world class on your committee, and it will take quite a while to unpack not only what they've said, but what lies between the lines. What are the more subtle implications? I will, when we say goodbye to them and continue, I will be asking you to transcribe the recording of this part, not the first hour, but this hour, not verbatim, but that each of the major requests they've made you have in writing, and then we will go through it and order it and make sure that it's clear, and then talk about step by step how you can do the dissertation in a way that takes these guidelines into account. This is a conversation which has an endpoint, namely on the day of the dissertation defense. And I know my colleagues well enough to know that they will remember what they've said, and they'll be looking for it as they're reading the final draft. And that it gives a chance to expand what is expected and for you to write a stronger book, a stronger first book. Well, not in your case, not first book, as a result. I'm not going to add anything at this point. We'll have lots of time to talk. I think I'd like to go around, and this is sort of a formal decision. Each professor will say that you do not need to make any changes to the proposal and you are ABD, or you need to go back and revise your proposal before you start writing. I'll let each one of them speak their view. And when we have that vote in, then you are either in the most blessed status that a dissertation student can be in, or you have some steps still to get there. So let's find out in this moment of drama, Professor Faber. Yeah.
Yeah. Get the drum roll, right.
So obviously, I'm not only an evil spirit. I wish you all the best. I wish you that succeeds, right? Or I could say good luck doing that. So it's a pass, and it should become an important work. And if you take into account what we all said, I think you'll be fine. If I can say one more image, if I can use one more image, you don't have to take it literally, right? It sounds to me sometimes, and that's kind of the problem of dissertation. You are a Southern Baptist who wants to be a materialist, but he needs to take with him all the nice things he likes about Southern Baptism. That's an image, okay? It's not that bad, but okay. So this is like I want to see you become, get to a certain point where you are clear where you are.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Roland. Professor Delphitt.
Well, it is an interesting proposal for 3 dissertations, and I think you have to make up your mind which one you want to write. And this is, I think, one of the first things you have to get clear about. I think there is a trajectory, and the clearer you define your leading or guiding question, the clearer the dissertation will become. And I'm looking forward to reading this dissertation because it's full of good stuff, and you have a lot of a range, of very interesting positions which you want to draw in. You will experience what everybody experiences who writes a dissertation, that they start at a large scale sort of project and end up doing a couple of footnotes elaborating them. So don't be surprised when you have to cut it down. You've got 200 pages, and 200 pages are written not in an afternoon, but you have to make the best use of this. And perhaps looking at what looks like a small question to you may be a more helpful way into the problem than throwing too much material into this. So don't feel that you will lose something by giving away here. Be more kinetic here.
Right. I think that sort of ties into what I was mentioning to Dr. Clayton earlier, which is one of the criticisms that I received from John Hall. Right. He sort of wanted me to narrow my scope a little bit. Right. So that ties into that, Dr. Dalford. It does indeed. Right. As you say, I've got 3 dissertations here, and I don't want to do 3 at once. Not at all.
Great. Based on this discussion, it's my privilege to inform you that with a short sortie through Pratitya Samutpada as an exception, you are all but dissertation, ABD. And I want to thank my colleagues for taking 2 hours out of their day in a busy time to offer so much guidance. It's really been a high level discussion, and I'm very pleased at that. Thank you, Roland and Ingolf, for being on the call. Roland, we meet soon im Land des Kaisers. It's an Österreicher. This is a very unusual thing for somebody trained in Bavaria and somebody born in Austria to meet in the land of Kaiser, but so it happens, right?
Okay.
Ingolf, enjoy your summer.
Well, thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Good move, Roland.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I'll say goodbye to Ingolf and Roland, and we'll be in touch.
I thank you, gentlemen. One last time, I do thank you. I think I've selected, or I didn't select, but I sort of proto-selected a great committee, and this is going to improve my final product tremendously. And I appreciate your insights and so forth and your suggestions. Yes, I do.
Yeah, thank you. We won't let you through without doing the best.
Bye.
That was bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Congratulations, Bradford.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So you are exhausted and justifiably need the chance to take a walk and exercise. So I want to handle just the very basic steps now, put them on the same tape with their other comments, and then I'll let you go and celebrate in whatever way is appropriate in your life and personality. Their comments were at a very high level. They didn't, higher than I expected. They didn't just say, here's a problem on these 5 pages, change it. They gave you the compliment of raising very broad framework questions in how you approach the project, how you frame the project, and how you then write the dissertation. Always at this stage, and I've told you this before, I think you knew it was coming, I'll ask you, first, obviously, get the 1 paper done so that that's behind you, the Buddhism part. And then make a transcript. It doesn't need to be verbatim, but sort of bullet points of the major things that they said. Try to use headings or outline format maybe, so that you can try to identify the main points they were getting at, and then what were the details of how they said it. And And we will go through that document several times. And then we'll begin to do a work plan based on that. You now do not need to go back to the dissertation proposal. It's now history. No changes of wording in that. It served its function. What we're now doing is doing the actual writing plan.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the compliment they gave you is that they asked you not just to say and write what you know, not just to use the people that you like and the distinctions you know, but they want you to, building on what you already know in your research and publications, to conceive this project as achieving something new. They want you to I think it was a beautiful thing when he said, think about what you don't know and want to learn. Think about questions you want to answer. And after you do the outline, I'm probably going to ask you to write that one-page document that he mentioned and send it to me, and then we have a meeting just on that. Okay. You owe it to yourself that this is the only book you'll write with 3 PhDs and world-famous scholars all shooting for your success and looking at every word. And this should be a book significantly higher level than anything you've written before or any of the next couple of books that are lined up. And so trying to decide, what don't you know? What's a question that you really would like to answer in a way beyond what you've done so far? And then we'll do justice to that moment, that exhortation from Dalford, before, actually redoing the outline, thinking about the work plan and so forth. So I'm really excited. It was really one of the highest level sets of inputs that I've seen in several years on doctoral committees. And it's a huge compliment to you that we hold up before you those kinds of standards. They held up before you the standards of a mature scholar.
That's very encouraging that you put it that way. I appreciate you saying that, is to do. Right. Yeah.
Congratulations on getting through your exams. I think that it was clear from my first talk with them that they were ready to pass you and wanted to stretch you a little bit along the way. And at some point you get to listen to this recording of that hour and just learn from it and keep it in your files so that you may want to go back to it in future years. Yeah. All right, that's all I have to say. Now we should talk about, you need to fill out which of those forms that you attached for me in a recent email.
Yeah.
Fill out the 2 forms. I think they're number 4 and 6, and send them to me as attachments. Okay. Scan them and send them to me as attachments. I'll check them and then we'll circulate them to the professors. Everyone will send back the signature to Sansu, and then and you'll get that little paper in, and then you will be ABD, and the school will then record you as continuing enrollment. So Sansu will then know which of the 2 classes apply.
Okay.
And we'll have that done in time for registration, so it's not an issue at all.
Okay. All right.
You could actually register on August 23rd and still be fine.
Okay.
So
well, I hope to have that issue with your comp done way before then. Right. Yeah. I do.
Won't be a problem. Yeah.
Okay. All right then.
Okay, I'm ready to let you go take a walk and hoot and holler or whatever your tradition does. Congratulations.
Call mom. No.
Call mom. Congratulations on a fine performance.
Thank you, Dr. Clayton. I appreciate it, Phil. I sure do.
All right. And we'll be in touch soon. You know that I'm moving over the next couple of weeks, so if I'm slow in email response, you'll understand.
Entirely, I do, yes.
Okay, good. Be well, and congratulations, Bradford.
Thank you again.
All right, and bye now.
Goodbye.